on with Magilla and Roel and Mr. Capaldi. We're going to be talking today about the Sikikey letter, which I'm sure a lot of you are pretty excited about because you've been talking about it on... Sorry. Because you've been talking about it on Twitter, obviously, a lot. I know it was a pretty popular topic there the last day or two. So we're here today to talk about that. We're talking a little bit about Loof again, and we're going to talk a little bit about the white Jeep that, you know, has been a thing of interest in the Avery case because there's always the account of seeing that white Jeep driving away one night. Whoops, I got to get back to...
Uh-oh.
There we are.
Regress there.
Right, it started going off into infinity like two mirrors. Anyways, no.
Yeah, we call it Droste effect in the Netherlands.
So, anyways, all right. So there we are. We're straightened out. No rogue audio from my YouTube window, and here we are with the content on screen. So, all right. Welcome, guys. By the way, Roel and Magilla. And
hi, Erekose.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. I apologize. I think I still misspelled Roel in the title of this page, but I think I fixed it up everywhere else.
Unfortunately, something was happening with YouTube, folks, and when I changed it to add Roel, for some reason it wasn't doing that for the thumbprint online. I don't know why, but frustrating. But
no
I don't
problem.
know why. So
no problem at all.
Here, I got it fixed there.
So obviously, where we're going to be starting is with Roel's recent, discoveries regarding the Sikikey letter or thoughts regarding it, however you want to look at it. But so there's been some analysis going on regarding it, and the Sikikey letter is a real point of interest, folks, because I mean it's perplexing as hell to look at, read, and examine. It's just perplexing as hell, but it's so clearly connected to Avery, and I mean it's just. So it's always a point of wonder. So it'll be fun to go ahead and explore the topic here today. So at this point, I'll go ahead and let Roel take over the presentation.
Okay, thank you. This week I was reviewing some photos of the queso batch we got, and there were two photos of the Sikikey letter in its evidence bag. You can see the front and you can see the back, and we all know, well, at the front what's been written: body was burned in the smelter. On the back you can see the addressee, which is Manitowoc Sheriff, and Avery is written on that. But it was the first time that I actually saw that if you look closely at the back of that letter.
If you click that link, it'll take you to your Twitter post.
Okay. So let's do that.
And then, if you now zoom in on the third or the fourth, you need to click on the photo, actually.
Okay. The third or fourth photo, these two?
Yeah, these two.
Okay.
Yeah. If you look at that one, and if you could zoom in a little bit, you can see actually on the left part of that paper, you can see that there are two words you can read, and I have a close-up actually. If you scroll to the left, the first or the second photo. Yeah, that's to the right. The other one. Yeah. And you can one more. Yes. Then you can see that those two words burned up are readable. They have been written on the front of the letter, but this is the back, and it's shining through. It has a big imprint. So you can actually see those two words having been written on the front of that letter when you
almost as if somebody had to like double write it for some reason.
Well, it's not double written. You can see that if you look at the second photo,
Yeah.
you can see that it's not double written. It's single written, but it's either written with another pen or by someone who will put more force in it to write it or whatever.
Right.
And as if to emphasize these two words, they were as if they were very important or whatever.
Right.
So
actually, between writers, there's difference in pressure applied. Like I always break pencil tips from mechanical pencils because I bear down too hard.
Right. Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
being a gorilla, you know, it's.
Yeah. Those thin. Hey, I have the same problem with those thin little leads that are in those mechanical pencils. You know.
But some people swear by them.
Yeah. So the first thing I thought was it one writer who wanted to emphasize especially these two words, and then Magilla stepped in and he said, well, maybe it's two writers, and well, there is actually more evidence that it's actually written by two different people. I think, Magilla, you can step in now.
Yeah, so if we go back to the main presentation.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah. Here, go to this Sikikey exhaustive analysis. So the first thing that happened was Roel and I were discussing this, IMing it. And I got the idea that the cursive writing was by a different person than the print writing. And when we looked at it, the print writing, we see the person misspelled the word Friday. It's spelled Fritty or Fritty.
Friday.
Yeah, so if we think back to when we were in grade school, I guess we probably learned to spell the days of the week in second or third grade.
Right.
So this person's writing on a second or third grade level. Also at that level, I don't think we had learned cursive writing yet. And then the person writing in cursive writing, and I think Roel made a point of this, had misspelled aluminum. I think I said aluminum to him because I didn't want to insult the writer, and he said something like, I think it says alunaman.
Yeah.
And I think
alunaman, yeah.
Yep.
So we have a second person who knows cursive writing, who I think is helping the first, but they're still at a level where they can't spell aluminum. So the thought is this is somebody who probably works in the Wisconsin aluminum foundry where Scott Taddick had a job.
It is well known that those folks there are not the most educated and would fit that criteria. So
I started thinking, well, it looks like the second person isn't as familiar with the aluminum foundry. Because spelling aluminum, you'd think if you worked in the aluminum foundry, you'd think you'd go by that sign every morning, and that'd be like one word you could spell. So I got the feeling the second person didn't work in the aluminum foundry, and the first person only could write at a second or third grade level. And the second person, I think if you probably learned to spell aluminum correctly, maybe in sixth or seventh grade.
Yeah, I would say that's a more advanced word. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And it's a hard word for some people, especially if they hear English people say it. They say they put like extra syllables in it, aluminium or something. Yeah, I'm not sure where the syllables come from, but I mean, you hear that and then you try to write it. So I started getting this instinct. I don't have any evidence for it, that the second person might be the child of the first. And the reason they write better is because they're attending an American school, and the first person might be a person who's came over and is learning English as a second language, and may speak English quite a bit better, but really is struggling to write English.
Write and read it, right? Sure.
Right. So, and maybe the parent of the child that's writing the cursive. Also, there was some other things that made it look like the first person had just written something, the second person helped them. There's the capital SM at the beginning of smelter.
Right.
And what I thought was the word melter was written, and then they probably discussed it and corrected it to be smelter.
Right.
And then aluminum was written, or alunimon was written in it. It was running out of space, and there's a big comma put in there that I think was just supposed to indicate a word break. So we have a lot of evidence there. We did some posts on this, and we got some feedback, and we found a year ago this post that we're looking at now. Somebody said they did an exhaustive analysis. I think we thought we had maybe discovered something, so we posted. And then this person did a much more in-depth analysis. They imply maybe that they are knowledgeable about linguistic theory.
Mm-hmm.
But they reached the same conclusion. So if we just scroll through this, they say it's a native speaker did not write this. They go into some effort to explain language 1 is the mother tongue, language 2 is a secondary language. I even saw this person struggling with the word body. I think originally it said bony, and then it was corrected to say body. So the first person is really struggling with English, and maybe even struggling with his letters.
Right. Okay.
Maybe used to writing Chinese characters or something like that.
Yeah, we're jumping ahead in our theory here a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so
all right.
Sorry.
We were looking at this, and this post is goes into, if you pull up this copy I annotated, he's got a pretty good, or she, I'm not sure who. So he calls the two people the witness and the helper, and my instinct was to call it the parent and the child too, because I just thought the cursive looks primitive, but it felt like grade school cursive to me for some reason. So what we see is he has the witness saying body was melter 3 a.m. Friday morn, and then I think the helper came over, had him insert the S before melter. I'm not sure which one wrote that S. Somebody commented it's very similar to the S in Sikikey. So, and then the helper wrote in the cursive that sort of corrects the sentence to be more correct. Like body, and you can see it used to say bony. So it might have originally said bony was melter 3 a.m. Which
yeah, because you can't see a line there.
Yeah, and then you see the helper wrote in burnt up in aluminum, spelled wrong, smelter Friday morn.
Right.
So also this person went on to say that when you learn English as a second language, you learn orally much faster than you learn written. And if you don't use the written skills, you might never develop them. So you could actually become pretty proficient orally and have very bad written skills.
Right.
But if Sikikey is supposed to be the name of this person, it's probably like a phonetic spelling, because English is not this person's language. But the vowels may be pronounced differently. I do know for Chinese languages that the translation of the ideograms to English follows rules that were set, I think, a long time ago that actually contain errors in how it's translated. So they actually picked the wrong vowels. One real common thing is the Tao is for Taoism. Should have been translated as a D, but because of this old set of rules, it's always translated as a T. And there's also issues with the vowels they choose. Okay, so that's interesting. So now we think 2 people wrote this letter. We actually got confirmation, so we didn't discover anything. It was like I guess we discovered it independently and found out somebody had already discovered it before us. And from this letter, we got a lot of interesting information. So Roel and I'm trying to roll my R's. We went out and we looked for what groups have recently immigrated into this area. So Wisconsin is it's full of immigrants, but a lot of the ethnic groups in Wisconsin immigrated in the 1800s.
Right.
So we're looking for somebody whose parents would so the child would be in grade school and the parents would still be actually born in another country. And it turns out that there's a group of people called the Hmong, or just Hmong, I think. It's spelled Hmong. This was an ethnic group of people in China that fought with the South Vietnamese in the United States during the Vietnam War, and they were primarily located in Vietnam and Laos. And to avoid the genocide that occurred after the United States withdrawal, a lot of them immigrated to the United States. And it turns out that Sheboygan and Manitowoc counties in Wisconsin are where they're concentrated. We actually found a presentation showing a map of where they are.
Mm.
This would also explain just how bad some of this spelling is, because I don't know if anybody's tried to learn Chinese after learning, French, English, German, or Italian,
Right.
languages that use a common typewriter. But it's very hard to go to written Chinese from those languages. I think it's equally foreign for somebody who learns those Chinese alphabet ideograms to go to our language, and especially with the errors that were made historically that are still in place for some of the translations of the names.
Hmm.
Okay, so we haven't had a whole lot of eye candy for this. Let's see if we have something. Okay, so
Yeah. Shall I go on about Korean?
yeah. So do we have anything to show?
I don't think we have anything to show about Korean, but let me tell you some facts about Korean. Korean is one of those Hmong, a member of that Hmong community in Manitowoc, and he was actually living in Manitowoc in all the years that this happened until 2016, and he was shot. He was killed on his doorstep. Someone knocked on his door, and he opened the door, and then he got shot, and he died at the spot. It was in 2016, a few months after Making a Murderer came out. There's a lot of speculation, but first I want to present facts, just the facts. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go a little bit into the speculation. So it was the first shooting homicide in the city of Manitowoc since 2001. So it was not that common that you can say, well, that happens all the time in Manitowoc City.
Right.
No.
15 years previously? That's a pretty long time.
That's a pretty long time. And now here's the coincidence. He had committed a violent act, battery, on October 30th, 2005. That's a pretty telling date, I think. And he was probably also arrested, but well, that's speculation. I'll go into that later. But he has committed violence. We have court records of that. He worked at a factory. He didn't work at the aluminum foundry itself, but he worked at a factory in Manitowoc where also Robert Fabian worked, Manitowoc Cranes. his lawyer, he had some stuff to do with police to sort out justice system. He had a lawyer. It was called Sikikey. I think it's a Polish name or something from that area, which was actually first lawyer of Brandon, who need to excuse himself because he turned out to be a relative of Theresa Halbach.
Yeah, I remember that name. Yeah.
That was the lawyer of this Cor Yang guy. Now, when he was shot, it was all over the news in the Manitowoc City Police, not to be confused with the MTSO, which is the Sheriff's Department. It's for the county. They have no jurisdiction in the city of Manitowoc. So the Manitowoc City Police went on the television shows and they said, well, there is no connection whatsoever between this homicide and making a murderer. Nothing to do with Stephen Avery, nothing to do with Theresa Halbach. Okay, that's what they told at that moment. They knew that very, very, very soon. Now, there have been possible murderers identified. Two Asian guys, also Quinn Orne-Smith and Joe Vang. They came out of a DNA analysis, and it was run against the database, and they were these were the two hits for the DNA from the crime scene, from the murder weapon. And so one of them was arrested. I think they couldn't trace the other one, but Quinn Smith was arrested, the 22-year-old. A member of the Asian Crips gang, but 1 year later, their case was dismissed, and there was forensic evidence. Smith's DNA was found on the murder weapon, and also Vang was implicated by DNA evidence. So it's pretty shady why that case was dismissed. Officially, they said, well, the police is going to investigate some more, and we don't want to do double jeopardy, charge them too early, do a trial without enough evidence. But they haven't been charged afterwards. So it was for shady reasons dismissed. And the funny thing is that number third Redditor, we saw that post, that exhaustive analysis, and he came to that conclusion that Sikikey was probably from the Hmong region, from China, Vietnam, before he knew anything about Cor Yang murder. So.
Okay, right. Okay,
yeah.
So that is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting facts, and there has been a lot of speculation also afterwards, which I will go into now a bit. Sikikey might be a phonetic spelling of his lawyer's name, Sikikey,
right?
Something like that. The speculation was, of course, that he might have known something about the Theresa Halbach murder. He might have heard Robert Fabian talking about something, or maybe that's something that Scott Teddick did. We don't know for sure if Robert Fabian and Scott Teddick knew each other, talked to each other. Robert spoke more with Earl, I think, whereas Scott was related to Barb, but well, maybe they had a connection also. There is speculation that this man, Cor Yang, would have wanted the police to know that he heard something about a body being burned in a smelter. The other possibility is that he was arrested in that weekend of the 30th of October 2005, and that he was in custody on Halloween and might have overheard law enforcement guys telling things about the murder and possibly the framing. Now, if he had heard something about the framing. It's a bit bizarre to send a letter to that same sheriff's department. So I don't know about that. But the other thing, the Robert Fabian connection, could be something.
What I thought was that Cor Yang might have known the writer of the Sikikey letter. So within Manitowoc, the Hmong community, there's like a single church they go to. They have an ethnic grocery store. So the people living there have a tight little community and probably know each other. I think the person who wrote the Sikikey letter, he was probably working at the aluminum foundry, would be my guess, and Cor might have been an associate. So he might have just gotten information directly from this other Laotian.
Yeah, good possibility. Yeah, great thinking, I think. And now, after Making a Murderer came out, and this is speculation, of course, but it could be that either Cor Yang or the writer of the Sikikey letter, or maybe both, put one and one together and thought, hey, that equals 2. And they tried to speak to someone about what they thought happened actually in the Teresa Halbach murder. And the speculation is then that law enforcement hired a killer from the Asian Crips gang to finish this guy off before he could talk too much. And that could also be the reason that Smith and Fang, those 2 alleged murderers, could escape prosecution, because they knew too much. And if they were tried in the trial, then they would spill too much information. The spilled beans, yes. Okay, so this is what we have about the Cor Yang connection.
Right. So that is somewhat interesting, and it's interesting, like you said, that the analysis that you were just looking at, he was fingering that region of China before knowing about Cor Yang. So that's interesting. Yeah. That's all interesting coincidences, you know.
Okay. Let me just. So what we have here, in summary, is I think we developed some new leads to follow up to see if the person who wrote the Sikikey letter, or the 2 people who wrote the Sikikey letter, can be identified. We think it was 2 people. The first person had the ability to write on the 2nd or 3rd grade level, and seems to have English as a second language, and probably did not have a common alphabet with English in their primary language. The second person, I have a hunch that person might have been somebody in an elementary school. That could help identify the family. When we look ethnically, the Hmong Chinese who came from Laos and Vietnam are an ethnic group in that area. So this gives us a lead to try to find the writer of the Sikikey letter. There might be, so if this second writer was in the 5th or 6th grade, the one that couldn't spell aluminum, what would that make them? About 11, 15 years ago. So they'd be like 26 now, and probably would be very literate because they were raised in the United States, literate in English.
Right.
So it's just, it brings a little more life to the story. I know a lot of people roll their eyes on Sikikey because really nothing useful's come out of it yet.
Yeah, I know, but it's I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, you can't help but puzzle over it because it's just so clearly, you know, connected in, you know, to the case, and it's just like, but it's puzzling as hell. That's for certain.
I've got a question. I don't know if you'll be able to help me on this one. Nick Stolke, who was obviously used in the case as the
blood spatter expert.
Yeah, well, his expertise is actually in handwriting.
Right.
I'm pretty sure he never at any point did they get him to look at it. The letter is that right? They neither, obviously the prosecution aren't really wanting to go too much into it, but I don't think the defence had any opportunity really to do any analysis of it, did they?
Well, I think recently they did, and he was actually supporting the statement that they might have been trying to spell skinny, which was Scott Taddick's nickname at work.
Right. Right.
When he was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He had a different nickname when he was out of the room.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You can only guess.
So yeah, that is interesting. Obviously, I mean, I guess it's gonna be interesting to learn more about Corey Yang. I guess moving forward, but it's a very intriguing theory though, because the two writers, and even saying one is a immigrant who may not have actually had any proper learning of English, particularly in terms of writing it, and then that would explain why a kid in school would be learning that. I mean, so a lot of that lines up. I like that. It's very interesting to consider.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I can weave entertaining stories that that have nothing to do with reality. So
well, there you go. But you're bringing facts to back it up. So
Yeah, I think what's particularly powerful is the fact that it does, as you say, even by the fact that one bit of it is somebody's written harder than somewhere else. That it does tend to look as if, very much as you were saying, that it wasn't just one person that wrote this, that one person wrote the majority of it, but then had somebody else to help.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that the word aluminum or whatever was written there, it's not visible on the backside of that letter. So there was not much pressure when writing that word.
Or as much.
As much as was with the words burned up.
But they were trying to fit the word into a small space, so maybe that made them lighten up. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be that there is a reason to focus on something else. How do I get it in this space instead of putting much pressure?
Yeah, or your natural pressure. I think. Yeah. I remember at school when I was trying to write my letters really good, on the lined paper, I would push down real hard.
Yeah, well, I'm so old. We used chalk and slate. But, anyway.
And I want to add a detail. We all know the Sikikey scan of Riddle, because it's in the report by Mike Riddle, the fingerprint expert of the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. And then it's a little bit different. So if you look at that scan, you see a horizontal line crossing the word aluminum, which isn't there in reality. So it's the folding of the paper, and then the scanning, seeing that fold as a line. So there isn't actually a line. And another thing is that the words burned up are in the scan, they are lighter, not heavier than the other words around them. Okay. So I wrote a nice explanation on Reddit today. Someone saying, well, because it's being written with more pressure, it doesn't align flat to the scanner plate, the scanner glass, so that it's harder to pick up that part of the paper.
Or one thing that might have happened is the pen wasn't writing well, so they bared down harder, and then maybe they just took it out and shook it before they wrote aluminum. I mean, everybody does that, right?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
You whip it so that the ink gets
down towards the ball in the ball.
Yeah, and then it starts writing well. So maybe when it's not writing well, you're going to bear down, try to force ink out of it.
Right.
Okay, but once again,
Possibility.
I mean, it would explain what's happening, but I think the big thing is it gives us some leads to go on identifying these people. If we had the roster of people at the smelter, now we're looking for somebody probably in the Hmong Asian community there, and probably maybe somebody who has a child in school at that time.
All right.
All righty.
Are we on to the white Jeep?
Yep. So, okay, so let's just do the background here. The white Jeep comes from Wilmer Siebert or Seymour?
Siebert.
Siebert. Wilmer, of course, lived in that house on Jamba Creek Road that Loof walked around.
Right.
And he's the one that reported seeing a
White Jeep.
white Jeep and the SUV that he thinks was a RAV4 pull in to the access road to the quarry from Jamba Creek Road by his house. He's the one that reported that the Jeep seemed to have rust on its hood and that it was white and a smaller type of Jeep. And I guess we had a trio of TikTok Manitowoc experts spot some information about these. I think Patricio girl, or I'm not sure how she pronounced
Patricio.
Patricio.
Patricio, I think is how that's pronounced.
Okay, discovered somebody that's a person of, or somebody that owned a Jeep at that time who's a person of interest. So that person, so if we start with Ryan Hallbach, he had a sister named Lynn or Tara Hallbach. Currently she goes by Tara. I think during part of her life she went by Lynn. She married a guy named Chad Blahoviak. There's a W in it, but it's pronounced like a V, so it's Blahoviak. And Chad had a younger brother who was almost the same age as Ryan, who was named Jason. So Jason Blahoviak, it was spotted that he bought a 1977 Jeep CJ5 in 2002. So you can see purchased in 2002 there.
Yeah.
So that was the lead. I assume since she's got girl in her handle that she's a girl.
I'm thinking it might be Petri Choir Girl too. I'm not sure actually.
Yeah.
Petri Core?
I don't know.
Choir. It looks like it's spelled like choir.
Well, there's actually like 4 people with that handle on Twitter. So, I think she's on the other side of the planet. So, I could be wrong about that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, but that's one suggestion I have.
Okay, but I do want to credit her. That's her lead. She asked me to help a little bit. So we have a couple things here. So let's go to. Does she have any? I don't know how many pictures she has. She doesn't have much eye candy. So let's go back to the outline. She did decode the VIN number. The VIN number was in that title database that she found. So she had the VIN number of it. She knows the model year. So, yeah, pull up my tweet. Yeah, and let's pull up. Let's just start. If you can pull up that artwork, just click on it. So what's interesting is, as Wilmer said, that the Jeep was one of the smaller type, and the CJ5 it only has 1 row of seats. It's really a throwback to the old military Jeeps.
Mm-hmm.
And the newer Jeep of that style was the Wrangler, which has a back seat. So this is a smaller Jeep. You can see the one here is a 1977 Jeep, but of course it's in mint condition. This occurs in 2005, so it would be 18 years old when this young man, Jason, would have purchased it. In 2002, it would have only been 15 years old. But and he was not wealthy. And a matter of fact, if you go to the Wisconsin Circuit Court, he was going bankrupt a lot, and he was getting evicted from apartment buildings. So for him to have a car, and he was living with his parents, so his parents might have bought him the car. But it was at that time 18 years old. It was a smaller Jeep, and here he is. He's got instead of 6 degrees of separation, he's only got 1 or 2 degrees of separation from one of our suspects. So this was a really good lead. But we really don't. This is a white Jeep, but and they did come out in white. They were called Alpine white because I think like if you lived in the snow mountains, this would be a real good color. So you'd be sort of camouflaged in with the snow. So one of our other sleuths went and looked around Facebook and came up with a picture of what might have been a Jeep or might be a Jeep. And I'm showing that picture. Unfortunately, that's a tree between the camera and the Jeep that's blocking out most of the Jeep. The picture wasn't really of the Jeep, of course. But we do see that raised fender, which is characteristic of an off-road vehicle, high clearance to the wheel, raised fender. So that front of it, I immediately said that, yeah, that looks like a Jeep fender. It probably does. Okay, what I did was I used the eyedropper to pull out the approximate color there. So we go to the next tweet.
The next what? Tweet? Okay.
Yeah, and you pull this up. Okay, so that thing in the upper left is the fender, and then the splotch to its right is a color I pulled out of that fender. Of course, the fenders shows a lot of shades, but it's basically a blue. And if I had to match it to these, we have to assume it's faded and it's in bright sunlight, which makes it fade even lighter. So it's probably that medium blue poly would be probably the best guess of what color it is. Everybody agree with that? These were the colors that were available for the Jeep.
Yeah, I'd say that's closest.
And yeah, the Alpine white is probably not. It's not a match to the Alpine white.
Right.
Okay, so I looked at. So I guess we're hoping it was white, but so we
couldn't it be a bluish white?
It could be. So we also, if you pull this one up, I also found doing a background search of this individual that he did have 3 other vehicles he was associated with, all of which were built at least before 2005. And one of them was a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Now, a Grand Cherokee usually would not be considered. It's what the Wagoneer became. So the Grand Cherokee would be a bigger Jeep. Has a full back seat and a large cargo area. It's really a small truck. So
that's actually that orange car next to the RAV4 found on the Avery property is also a Grand Cherokee, I think.
No, it's a Jeep Wagoneer, but the Cherokee and the Wagoneer are the same car at different points in time. I guess Wagoneer sounded too 1950s, and they introduced the name Cherokee, which I think it actually did increase sales quite a bit. You know, Wagoneer sounded like your grandpa's car.
Yeah, right.
But as we look at this, it's getting a couple of degrees away from it. It doesn't really corroborate Wilmer's story. He's saying it's a small Jeep. This one's a 4-door with large cargo area. I think there's a larger Jeep, but this is one of the largest ones. Okay, so we go to the next one. And also, I pulled up white, but we don't know that the one he had was white. Okay, so this was actually Emerging Truth's original tweet. Is there any image in this one? You click on her image and see what she's got. No, the image in her tweet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You see another possible. I think there's two pieces of artwork there. Oh, it's just going to go back to her post. We already saw her post.
Okay, that's what I figured it was.
All right, so if we go on to the next one, in my thread, so you have to go back to Twitter is okay. So I started looking at the cover. Now Jeeps are sort of a pain in that they have hard covers and soft covers that you can get from the manufacturer, and then there's a large secondary market for them where you can get custom ones that do all sorts of weird things. Mm-hmm. And it's not uncommon for people to have both a soft cover and a hard cover. Usually you only use the soft cover in good weather.
Right.
And then if you're thinking you're going to go out and convert it, you'd take the soft cover. But if you were a good day and you weren't going very far, you'd probably even leave the soft cover in your garage and just take the car out as a convertible. Right. So this is one of the fun things about Jeeps. So when we look at the Jeep, then the picture that was found on the media from the Lahoviak family, we see it doesn't really seem to match up very well. But there are a lot of options, so I kept looking. All of these were the right model year, but none of them. It definitely looks like a hard top, and it's not a black hard top. It seems like the stock one was usually black.
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so we go to the next slide. I had a big finding. So I found out in 1977 there's these things called special editions that Jeep does. And special editions, they come out and they have all this special decal work done on the special editions. And for 1977, they came out with something called the Golden Eagle. And this is for the CJ5. And I was thinking that if that decal in the middle had weathered badly and had started to peel, that could have been what Wilmer saw.
As the rust.
As the rust, yeah.
Right.
So once again, this one is in mint condition. There's some interesting things about these decals. The factory decals, what they do is they put the decal on and then they put clear coat over the decal, so the decal is not exposed to the elements.
Right.
And this makes it much more durable. But in the aftermarket, you can get a professional person to do that for you, and it costs about $300. Or you can buy a decal that will make your CJ5 look like a Golden Eagle for about $150. But you're responsible for putting the clear coat on. Mm-hmm. So if you put the decal on without the clear coat, that decal is it's not
going to last long.
It's not, and it's going to look like crap after a pretty short period of time. Putting the clear coat on requires you to really clean that surface up well before you apply the clear coat too.
Oh yeah.
So you can put the clear coat on and mess it up pretty easily. Also, if you did the aftermarket ones, the Golden Eagle stencil there on the side, you might not have done. You might have just done the hood symbol.
Mm.
And there seems to be a pretty good market still for Golden Eagle trim packages. Yeah, so if you pull this one up, here's where you can buy one aftermarket to do it yourself. Yeah, this one's pretty steep. I found them for $159, so
yeah,
be expensive. but it's real easy to screw that up if you do it yourself.
Sure. Have you ever seen somebody that tried to tint their own windows?
How did it go, dude?
Oh, it wasn't me, dude. You see them all the time driving around where they try to tint their windows, and you just see bubbles everywhere because they didn't get all the air bubbles out. And yeah, so
Yeah, well, some things it takes the right tools to prepare it.
and a little bit of know-how.
Yeah,
You know?
and sometimes it's worth paying that extra $140 to get it right.
Right.
Okay, so if we go to so that was interesting. So we discovered that. Now, pull this one up. Okay, so I found something that really struck me. So I put these side by side. What I've done is I've stretched the lower Jeep so that the back of the door and the front of it line better with the top one. It's still a little small, I think. But you'll notice that the CJ5 has this characteristic of the trailing edge of the door that
Yeah, it's kind of an acute angle.
it leans backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was common to all the CJ5 tops. It has that backward lean on the door.
Right.
And when you look at this car that was in the picture that we espied, it looks like it clearly has a forward lean on that.
Yeah.
So this photo evidence was getting me to say that the photo that was identified is not a CJ5. We know that Jason B had a CJ5. So I don't think we've proven that his CJ5 wasn't white. I think it was great that photo was found. You know, I mean, here we have all our sleuthing going on, but we really don't know what color Jason's was.
And it could be a car of a visitor.
Yes,
possibly.
Or
on the one on the photo.
If you check out their family, he lived with his family. They lived in Syockton, Wisconsin, it's a satellite town of Green Bay and of Lake Winnebago, but it's much more out in the sticks, as we sometimes call it. It's by a big national park that's called a bog. A bog it's not a swamp because it's not full of water, but it's wet all the time. So it's sort of a bad land. Some people like hiking in bogs. I don't know. And their house is real close to it. It looks like they had a lot of property. So it might be that their family had more than one off-roader. I think this probably was bought to be an off-road vehicle. It probably was not bought to be an everyday car. I don't think I'm showing you the interiors of these, but these things are pretty Spartan, these old Jeeps.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, they went from that real Spartan thing to having nice interiors and really becoming a luxury car. But
when they became Grand Cherokees, they're certainly, yeah.
Yeah, so when you look at this, it's like the whole dashboard is just a metal plate with instruments mounted in it, and then
right, very simple.
And then the stick shift control looks like a mop handle. But it is very similar to the Jeep. It's much more similar to the Jeeps that were used during World War II.
Right.
And
Korea and Vietnam.
Yeah, it had this suspension, so you could put these huge wheels on it, have real good clearance, so that you could drive over trees and things. It was fun until I think 60 Minutes episode came out and was telling us how many of these things would flip on their side on the highway. And then I think that's when they ran away from the old CJ5. So it was really good for going a reasonable speed off-road, but it was not a good highway car.
Right. Yeah, they actually had a very difficult turn radius, some of these. So like you could only turn it so far. So you really needed to have room to turn with them, apparently.
Yeah, well, the oversized tires is probably causing that.
And just a little shift of it, like if you're on the freeway and you just turned it a little bit, it would start to turn the wheel so quick it would get you fishtailing.
Yeah, because also I don't think it had power steering. So
right.
But a lot of people have fun in these things. It actually was a very, fun car for a lot of families.
Yeah.
Good for giving lawn jobs, I hear.
Mhm.
Is that a word you use in the UK there, Paul?
I can't say I've come across it that often, to be honest.
Yeah, that's when you drive across your neighbor's lawn to usually because you're trying to
Dookie?
say something about a friend of yours in high school.
How do you know I've cut across the next door neighbour's driveway? Been
So
keeping an eye on it.
across their lawn.
Dropping a log.
Yeah, and then the neighbor's father starts putting out a board with nails in it for the next time you do it.
Right.
But I don't know. That was mischief back in the day.
All right, so that wraps up the white Jeep, I think, there.
Okay, so let's just give a brief summary. We got a real good lead on a car that may be, I think I've called it Private White Jeep's car. If we have the captain's driving the RAV4 and the private's driving the white Jeep. It's still a hot lead. We don't know what color this was. There's some other information if you're interested about Jason. He did die in a car accident in 2016.
Also in 2016.
Yeah, shortly after making a murderer. Yeah. And I don't know if they checked to see if his brakes had been tampered with, but
Speculation.
He was in trouble with the law ever since he was 19. So he was a black sheep in the family, and he was very close to Ryan's age. And their families knew each other from the start of Tara or Lynn dating Chad. So if anybody gets a lead on that, so we're out on the lookout for Laotian people who worked at the aluminum foundry who had children in grade school.
Laotian people, okay. Yep.
Well, most of them were from Laos or
Right.
Vietnam. I think the immigration papers for Wisconsin said they were probably from Laos.
Laos, right. So yeah, that's what you want to look for, folks. I think it'd be interesting if we can find someone who fits the description with a kid who would have been in school at the time, because I think it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, and also it might be in their community the story's better known, and those second generation people here will have much better language skills. So of course we don't want to get them murdered. So, but we don't really know Koryang has anything to do with this, but.
No,
right.
It's just speculation. There are a few odd coincidences, which might be coincidences for all we know, but might also be something different.
So these are just leads in the case file. We're trying to get all our sleuths to think about, because the case could break. I feel like the case is coming together.
Yeah.
And
having all this background information is going to help you understand when this thing breaks.
Yep.
When it eventually breaks and we figure out closer to what's happened, a lot of this information is going to be helpful in helping all of you understand. So,
okay, so I'm going to give you an update on Loof Science. So, we had a 6-part series on Loof Science. Covered a lot of things. The good thing is people are out there and they're starting to think about the scent dog trails when they develop their theories and realize that that's important evidence. Don't scroll away.
I'm just right here.
Okay, so if you start at the top there, one of the things that happened with them was I had sent leads on Loof Science to Jerry Buting. He's a fellow Wisconsinite. He lived in Brookfield, Wisconsin, it's a wealthy suburb of Milwaukee on the west side. And Jerry got back to me, which was a bit surprising. And he said he reviewed my analysis in episode 3, which is the one that I encouraged him to look at because it gives my guess at what all the trails mean.
Right.
And he said he hadn't had time to look at the others, but was interested.
Sure.
And then he said in here that he wished he had a lot more researchers supporting the defense to pick apart the state's case
back then.
And he really encouraged me to let the people know that he thinks that's really helping in this case.
Right.
I think one of the reasons I posted this in Twitter was a lot of people come down on Buting and Strang, and I really don't think they understand that given the resources they have, they had to gamble on what they invested their time and money on. They didn't have enough resources to cover everything. And unfortunately, in hindsight, we can see that the blood vial was a bad thing to gamble on. It ended up with the admission of the FBI evidence late in the trial that they couldn't work into their strategy. Pretty much the thing they wanted to lead with got blown up on them. But of course, now we've got Zellner's put together the superstar forensic team. We got the forensic episode, and we've got an army of Redditors researching this. So this is available for you to see. Jerry thought Loof Science sounded interesting. I've also sent it to. I'm trying to send it to everybody in sight.
Right.
If we could get it inside a little bit more, I would be happy because I do think it could be a real big break in the case.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think that link does as much more than show this email.
Okay.
It probably shows the Reddit thread. There was a lot of discussion on Reddit, so I put this in to try to break up a lot of people just bashing Jerry.
Sorry, I've read the first paragraph, but I didn't get the second or the third. Dude,
Okay.
would you like to
I
read?
thought he was summarizing for us, but
Yeah.
am I wrong?
Yeah, but go ahead and read it. I mean, I think
Just read it through because I'm struggling because you keep moving the screen up and down.
All right, so this is from Jerry, folks. I reviewed your analysis in episode 3, but not the others yet. Thanks for all of your hard, detailed work in this case. I'm continually amazed at the dedication and patience many people have to analyze the many, many unanswered questions in this case. I've said it before, and I'll repeat it here, that if Dean and I had had many minds picking apart the state's case, as they are now on Reddit, we would have been able to present a better case at trial. Whether what would have resulted in an acquittal is less certain because of the bias and possible tampering with the jury, which I have always suspected occurred. This is a complex case, and we did the best we could with the time we had and the evidence given to us. I'm hopeful that if SA gets a new trial, all the work you and others have done will make a difference. But I'm not sure we can ever truly know who the real killer was, because so much evidence was and continues to be destroyed or never recovered by law enforcement. That's a fair point. In some key areas, like the failure to photograph all the bones in the locations where they were found, or not having a forensic anthropologist. But anyway, no other reasonable explanation can be found, but that Ellie deliberately, not negligently, chose not to preserve such evidence. To me, that means they were deliberately hiding evidence that pointed to S.A.'s innocence, or Stephen Avery's innocence, and they would have otherwise preserved the evidence. Who did it implicate? The police themselves, the star witness Bobby, or perhaps their volunteer coordinator Ryan, who should have been the number one suspect initially, based on the statistics of former boyfriends killing women. Perhaps the dog search trails can help answer this, so I applaud your efforts. I've received a number of links recently to detailed analyses of other pieces of evidence, like the bones. I haven't had time to review them all, but I will do what I can. Best, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's definitely, of all the ones I've been in touch with, he's the one that always gets back.
Yeah.
Always gets back.
He's and amazing that with as busy as he is, that he's able to answer so many people's emails, that he finds the time. You know.
Well, yeah, and he is making some money off this case. So
Well, yeah, certainly his little tours that he goes around on.
yeah,
Well,
but
I
he
don't
is
know.
a huge advocate for wrongful convictions now. I don't know if he was so much when this whole thing started, but he's definitely doing that now. And
Well, I think in fairness, they didn't have the platform that they do now, thanks to Making a Murder, did they? You know,
Yep.
I mean, they couldn't go on a world tour saying, this guy in Steve Avery if nobody's ever heard of him. But obviously, Making a Murder comes along, and yes, I mean, some of them are going on world tours. I don't know that they're actually making a huge amount of money compared with, for example, if they were staying in their own place. In Wisconsin,
And practicing law, right?
Normal legal stuff. But I mean, hopefully Jerry's book.
Not if they're representing Stephen Avery, because they only make about $9 an hour when they do that. So,
well, I do think that of all of them, I think Jerry is he's doing the best he can, and it's nice. It's nice when he gets back in touch and writes nicely to Magilla about this.
absolutely,
the work that you've done. I think that's.
And I agree with him about Magilla's work. By the way, it's just very good. And Roel, I mean, everything we've gone through today, very, very interesting and thought provoking. So
I have to say, not many people respond to emails from gorillas.
Hey, but it had Mr. People's Pet Shop letterhead, right? That's what did it.
Absolutely. He's probably a lover of Hanna-Barbera.
There you go.
Well, I mean, that's raised a question for me, isn't it? Because I mean, I'm 18 miles from Peebles, and there's 3 pet shops, and I haven't found you yet, dude.
Well, are you? I'm pretty sure I can be shipped if you're
Okay.
looking for a gorilla.
Shit.
I only weigh 390 pounds, and I eat about 170 pounds of
Bananas a day.
well, vegetables and bananas. It's
Right.
not all bananas.
Yeah.
I have to get my greens.
It was something else I wrote down.
Termite.
We were talking about the clear coat on the Jeep, and when you
Right.
talk
The Golden Eagle.
yeah, the extra clear coat, it just reminded me of the dude William H. Macy in Fargo trying to sell the clear coat to the customers. You remember that?
Oh,
Yeah, and
You remember that? Yeah. Was it clear coat he was trying to sell?
adders. Yeah, that's the classic used car salesman trying to get all the adders at the end of the sale.
Yep. And just one final point. You mentioned that the Chinese community in Manitou have their own sort of ethnic stores. Would that include food stores?
Yeah, I mean they have.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a group of about 10,000 people there that to support their elders that aren't English speaking or as English speaking. They have their own little ethnic community.
Right.
There's a Hmong cultural center there. They participate in the city council.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're and there's even more of them in Sheboygan. Sheboygan and Manitowoc are, and for the state, there's about 60,000 of them that
Wow.
came across.
So about 10,000 in Manitowoc County. I mean, Manitowoc County is just about 80,000 population. So
Yeah, but they heard there were jobs in the sheriff's departments, and so they came.
well, actually, I was just inquiring for a friend whether this food stuff, whether this friend of mine would be able to get good quality chorizo sausage, but I don't know.
I think you might find some good sausage up here, but I don't think you'll get it at the Chinese food store. Though I mean, I'm sure they could adapt and learn to make sausage. And
yeah. They're doing a pretty good job of making scotch, apparently. So anyway.
oh yeah, and it's all a matter of knowing what ingredients to use.
Yeah.
There's not that much to making the sausage,
Right. Yeah.
but
Other than seasoning it, or this or that.
what do you put in it, and the seasonings, and the difference between good and bad sausage is a pretty significant thing.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, because
Bad sausage is bad.
well, it's bland or yeah, I mean they can also put the wrong seasonings in it and make it taste awful.
Yeah, right.
But we digress. So one of the great things I think about Loof Science is it's really starting to get into the community. People are thinking about it, and a lot of other people are starting to research it. And it seems like the first thing they do is launch an attack on me that everything I'm saying is wrong.
Sometimes people do that, you know.
Well, which is fine. But sometimes it's because they've read half of one article, and I haven't read that much, but I have probably read 9 books on this now. Um, so if we why don't we go to the Twitter thread? I think the link on top will take us to the Twitter thread, and this is just some of the discussion I've had. Yeah, so one of the problems I've had is there was a controversy as to whether or not the heavy rains of the 6th would get rid of the scent near where Teresa's RAV4 was parked. Because Loof did not find a track at the, he didn't find a, she didn't find a track to the RAV4, and she did find a scent pool near the van, but it did not lead to anywhere from the van. Okay, and some people were wanting to know, well, why would that be? And it's an interesting question. So the first thing I said, based on what I had read, was that the gravel road would have been a bad place to lay down scent. The surface is not ideal. Teresa was parked facing Stephen Avery's house on the far shoulder, so her driver's door in the States, or in a lot of places in the world, I hear, would have opened up on the left side, and she would have walked straight onto the gravel road and then over to the van. So she would have never walked in the grass to get in and out of her car. And leaving scent on the gravel road, it was also graded in such a way that the heavy rains would have washed the scent down off the road, probably.
Mm-hmm. Off the visible surface of the rocks, right?
Right. Well, and there's drainage ditches on either side of that road.
Right.
It's graded high in the center to make it drain.
Okay.
A little bit. It's not an amazing road. And it's become grass again, I think so.
Right.
So I said that without explaining it fully, and they said, well, what we've read is rain actually makes the scent stronger.
Mm.
And that is true too. Some light rain, what it'll do is it'll bring moisture back to the bacteria and bring the bacteria colony back alive from. So the bacteria colony, when is running out of resources. So there's a difference between some moisture and a heavy rain, and then there's also an issue with the surface. So we got into that. So this source was talking about the difference between a track scent. This guy was saying when the vegetation is crushed and the people's feet interact with the ground, it creates a track scent, is how he thinks of it. This is just one of the dog handlers. This isn't a scientist, but he has 30 years of practical experience with the dogs. One of the other things I had was people were coming up with, science studies on the dogs and saying that the first thing the science study always does is poo-poo on the handlers, saying that they don't know the real science. There's a lot of the raft theory that's in a lot of these books. It turns out that scent is much more complicated. There's oils involved in it and things. But what I found is the science literature isn't well funded, and the people have no practical experience with the dogs, and that the real knowledge pool is with the handlers that are training for police departments and the Army. It's not in like we do touch DNA, it's just the opposite. I mean, the people in the laboratory are the experts. And what you see constantly in these papers in the laboratory is the first thing they do is tell you that everything anecdotal is a lie and you shouldn't trust these handlers. And I do think the handlers who haven't gone through the certification, you have to take with a grain of salt. That all said, so there's this idea in this first paper about what was it? It was track scent, and he compared it dry weather sometimes to being like a mud cow pie. So a cow pie gets dropped, it smells really bad.
Right.
But if it gets hot and dry, the surface of the cow pie bakes and becomes dry and hard, and the inner cow pie isn't smelled anymore, and it's not so bad. But if somebody pokes a hole in that cow pie, the odor comes back.
Right.
So he said that a light rain or actually even walking on it can sometimes raise the odor. And he uses that analogy of it being like a cow pie. Of course, that's not a scientific analogy. It's just a way for you to think about it.
Yeah.
This is somebody who trains dogs for police departments. So this isn't, just, a guy with one dog in his life. And he says extreme heat will tend to make the scent go away, but after that, it can come back with light rain or even with humidity.
Right.
Okay, so if we get off of this one, it's there for people who are interested in more. Yep. So talk about breaking the crust of a cow pie with a pole.
Right. Right.
Something I do not recommend you do. Okay, and then I gave her a second reference. I think the references are consistent. That hard surfaces are bad for scent. They go away fast. The best vegetation surfaces. Light rain may have advantages, but heavy rain will tend to wash it out.
Right.
Okay, so it's a little more complicated than they had figured out yet. If you go back to the artwork in that one, they do have two specific questions. On hard surfaces, he says the lack of vegetative vapor, which is also used by the dog to follow the track, makes the track more short-lived. So as we look where Teresa walked across the gravel road, the scent track is not expected to last as long. The dogs are out there a week later. It would be worse on cement. Also, what he suggests is you work the dog around the edges of the road. The wind will probably have blown it off, and it may be the things that are giving the scent may be caught on the edge of the road.
Right.
Okay, to go to the second question from this book is how does a light rain affect? Again, it may bring back the bacterial activity, but prolonged rain saturates the process and washes out the ground picture. So again, light rain is good. Heavy rain is bad. You might still have the scent, but the scent is going to be washed out on the edges of things, and it'll no longer show in the trail, or it could get washed into a sewer and be gone. So,
Right.
okay, we had a heavy rain on the 6th, which was the day before they brought the scent dogs out. Okay, so if you click out of here, they were really beating on me, so I put a lot of references here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, click on that one. Okay, so he's saying there's ways to get around rain, even crossing a river, but you have to use some different techniques. So he's saying scent particles are on the surface of the water. They may tend to get pulled by a current. You may find them on the edges of logs and things. So it's a place where you take the dog to hunt for the scent more than following the trail. But he's even had success with bodies of water. We didn't have any scent trails like that, but it's interesting to know. If you go to the second one, I think it finishes this thought. Yeah, so this is once again, you can find them. There are dogs that they take out in boats and they sit on the front of boats, and they can actually find locations in the water where things are buried in the water from the surface scent. But they tend to have to search the surface and then alert when they find a spot that's interesting. They're not able to follow the tracks usually, like you can when it's over a vegetative surface. Okay, and that's just this was again a bloodhound reference, and bloodhounds are the best at tracking. They were also telling me that they were conflating human remains detection dogs. HRD dogs are what they call cadaver dogs in our case, with scent dogs. HRD dogs are trained to tell the difference between human remains and the remains of other animals. But scent dogs do not. They're just told to follow the scent that's on their scent article. So they were thinking the dog would naturally not follow the scent of a cat. So they were telling the cat trail was wrong. So I was telling her the same dogs follow track. There's actually a lot of dogs employed. Actually, I have a dog in the room that's getting mad at me right now. I don't think he's going to go away.
Dogs and gorillas go well together.
Well, I do better with kitty cats. You know, they like to climb on my fur, but I'm going to have to. I might have to take a break and let him out. So you can go through this. I'm very glad that people are reaching out to me, to ask questions or usually to accuse me of being an idiot. But,
well, we can wrap it up, actually, Magilla. I think we're around an hour and 30 minutes, and we can always revisit this a little bit later if you ever want to, of course.
Okay, so the good thing is the more you understand about the dogs and the trails and the weather conditions, the better it is to understand the evidence here. I still think the Loof track trails are the best evidence we have of the, I think it's the killer planting, leaving the car. There's a lot of information there. And I'm glad to see a lot of people are interested in it, learning about it, and just go easy on me. Some of my analysis may be wrong, but I did work on it a long time, and sometimes what you're quick to think is not quite. You just haven't read enough on the subject.
Sure, absolutely. All right.
I'm gonna.
We'll wrap it up. We'll let you get to the addressing the situation with your dog there, and
I have a retriever, not a bloodhound, but he can be insistent. So
yes, those are very playful and insistent dogs. Indeed.
Hashtag take care of your rug.
Yeah. All right, so that's gonna go ahead and wrap up this Sunday's discussion, folks. We'll hopefully be back again next Sunday with something else, or maybe even fleshing out some of the things we were talking about today a little bit more possibly. So we'll let you know, obviously, as soon as we decide to do it. The links will be appearing on Twitter and everywhere else, and you'll know where to be if we decide to do that. So all right, that's about it for this one. I'd like to say thank you, for Roel, for being here. Thank you, Magilla, if he's still there and not off with his puppy. And thank you, Paul.
Welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. It's been a lot of fun and very interesting. It's a very interesting discussion today. So, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.